All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Mark HANEY, president of Kentucky Farm Bureau, and I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to this very important forum that we have today. On behalf of the more than 470,000 farm families, we want to say how much we appreciate both of the campaigns being here and bringing the order to really this Measure the Candidate forum. We're fortunate to have both of our candidates here this morning, and I would first like to introduce Governor Matt Bevin. Would you please give a warm Farm Bureau welcome to the Governor, Matt Bevin. I would like to also introduce, if I would please, Attorney General Andy Beshear. Please give a warm Farm Bureau welcome.
How we doing?
I'd like to encourage each of you to silence your phones, if you would, please, for the event this morning. I'd like now to recognize and welcome our board of directors and their spouses that are here with us. They're sitting in the middle aisle right here. They give of their time each and every day to ensure that this organization serves all of agriculture. Also with us today, we have the executive committee, Eddie Melton, our first vice president, Sharon Furchess, our second vice president. We have Drew Graham, our executive vice president of Kentucky Farm Bureau. We have John Sparrow with us, executive vice president and CEO of Kentucky Farm Bureau Mutual Insurance Company. Today's program will begin with each candidate opening with a 5-minute statement. The candidates will then hear from our executive committee, who will present the topics. The topics for today's forum are the state budget, taxation, rural development, and infrastructure. These topics are selected from our priority issues. Each of you will have 3 minutes to respond to each topic, and the candidate that answers first will be given the opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal if desired. We will then end our forum with each candidate giving a 5-minute closing statement. Please notice that Ed McQueen, Ed, where are you? Right here in the front. Ed is a yellow and a red card. He's the timekeeper today, and when he raises the yellow card, you've got 30 seconds left to finish up your remarks, and when the red card goes up, we would ask you to please end your remarks and be ready for the next question. The order by which our candidates' remarks will be was determined by a coin toss previously back here just a few minutes ago, and we will now begin with opening remarks. First, we will hear from Attorney General Beshear.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, and I want to congratulate the Farm Bureau on 100 years of being a leading voice in agriculture. Now, I brought one of the leading voices in agriculture here with me today, former Commissioner Billy Ray Smith. He's one of those leading voices I listen to along with Roger Thomas, and those are some of the best advisors that I could ask for. You know, just like your crops and livestock, I was raised right here in Kentucky. I not only understand, but I have lived the importance of agriculture. My family hails from rural western Kentucky, where many of you all know that my granddad was a Baptist preacher and also the undertaker. You wanted to see him on Sunday and not any of the other days of the week. But he was also a small family farmer, where he grew some of the best corn that I still think that I have ever tasted. And I got to tell you, my granddad was fairly old even when I was born. And so my lasting memory is riding on that tractor around that plot with him. My first job, where my work ethic grew out of, was in agriculture, mucking stalls every morning starting at 5 or 6 a.m. You know, you build a lot of work ethic on a hot summer morning mucking stalls, and what's the reward for it? Weed eating. Because that's at a time when that's what you had to do in your fields. And the reward for that was mending fences. But I got to tell you, nothing prepares you for Frankfurt like mucking stalls. It's just a little bit deeper there. Folks, I know the importance of agriculture in this state. I mean, we have 75,000 farms, 13 million acres of farmland, $6 billion of products every single year. So you need a governor that not only understands and invests in agriculture, but talks about it at the most important times too. I'm going to bring that up a little bit later. We also desperately need a governor that doesn't divide us, but brings us together. I want to be the type of governor that represents everybody, rich, poor, and everywhere in between. Democrats, Republicans, independents, Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky, and Central Kentucky. We have got to be a state for everyone. You know, in church this last Sunday, our sermon was on treating thy neighbor as thyself. And the question was asked, who is our neighbor? The answer, everybody. And that's the type of governor you can expect me to be, one that respects everybody. There will never be bullying or name-calling coming out of the governor's office. We will treat those that disagree with us with the respect that they deserve. No one will ever be locked out of the Capitol. Our teachers will be treated with respect, and I will treat my lieutenant governor like a full partner. I want to be that type of governor that looks out for every area of this Commonwealth, especially our rural communities. And there is no question that agriculture is one of the pillars of those rural communities. But the two other pillars of our rural communities are public education and our rural hospitals. They are two of the biggest employers in those communities, and the current policies of this administration threaten thousands of jobs in your community in both. I support public education. I'm a product of it. I support it so much I selected a teacher as my running mate. Jacqueline Coleman from the rural town of Bergen. Anybody know where Bergen is? Will be the first active educator since Martha Lane Collins to serve as lieutenant governor. We've got to make sure that we have a governor that's not supporting for-profit charter schools that will run your systems of education out of town. What happens in your communities when the lights go off in your public schools and they never come back on? And I'm fighting every day for rural health care. This administration's policies looking to eliminate or curtail expanded Medicaid will result in the closures of rural hospitals. Those are thousands of jobs that support your communities, and your people shouldn't have to drive hours just to see a doctor. You don't believe me? Go back and ask them how much of their revenue right now comes from expanded Medicaid. And I'm fighting every single day to make sure no one is ever kicked off of their coverage for a pre-existing condition, and any policy has to cover what you need under it. I call that a kitchen table issue. Why? Because when I look around my kitchen table, my son Will, my daughter Lila, my wife Brittany, 3 out of 4 of us have a pre-existing condition. Folks, I want to build a big, bright Commonwealth, and we can do it together. I'm going to talk to you today about my vision for agritech, where we can create $100,000 jobs in your communities and give you everything from the best seeds to the technology that helps you improve your yield, to the data analytics to make sure what's happening out west never keeps you from having a successful season. We can do this together, and together we can grow the Commonwealth that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Governor.
I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for taking the time. Clearly, this is a special invitation, those of you that are involved most specifically with the leadership of the Kentucky Farm Bureau. But just the fact that you are in this room representing this organization speaks to your values, speaks to your work ethic, speaks to the things that you've been involved in throughout the course of your respective lives. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be the governor of this state. It's a big responsibility. We talk about agriculture, we talk about commitment to it. This is the world that I grew up in. I grew up raising crops, raising animals. I literally learned how to drive on a 48 Farmall Cub. It was the first thing I ever drove in my life. This is the background that I come from. You talk about bringing to the equation ideas and commitment. This is my foundation. And to that end, there's a lot of things that have been touched on, others that will be touched on as a result of the questions that we go through today. I just want to let you know that several things are my driving force. First of all, my Judeo-Christian faith defines my worldview. It just does. Defines who I am as a husband, as a father, who I was as a business person, who I am as a governor. Not everybody shares it. Not every single thing that I do every day is directly the result of a decision coming from my faith, but without question, it drives my entire decision-making process. The fact that I'm a military veteran, the fact that I grew up raising crops and animals, the fact that I'm a father of 9 children. My children are ages 9 through 20. I was just mentioning as we walked in here, I have 5 of them now with driver's licenses. There's a whole lot of things that affect my life as kids move about. Education, clearly, our roads and infrastructure, directly the result of my family and my family's impact. So much of the decision you're going to have to make here in the next days, weeks, months, in the first Tuesday in November, is going to be driven by your decision about who you think can best lead this state forward. We'll talk about this over the course of the next hour or so, but only one of the 2 of us is going to sit down across from you or members of your community if there's a problem. Only one of the 2 of us is going to step up in a time of crisis. Only one of the 2 of us is going to sit down across from the CEO of a company and make decisions on behalf of this state, not only for those that are already here, but for those that would look to the possibility of coming here. There have been analogies made, and there will be, to farming and things of this sort. Growing up in 4-H, I understand what it's like to be in the ag community. I grew up in a town of 250 people. The highlight of my life, literally, when I was a kid, was going to the county fair with my animals, sleeping in the barn for a week, actually a little less than a week. That was my chance, my ticket to ride, to get out. It was an extraordinary opportunity for a kid like me. But the analogy I can best give you as to where we've been for the last 4 years, and frankly, where we're going to be for the next 4 and even beyond, and that is one that I think will resonate with those of you in this room. We're at the stage in Kentucky where we have to clean out the barn. It isn't fun, it isn't easy, it doesn't always smell good, makes people's backs hurt, and people would rather do something else. But there has been a whole lot of political stuff that has piled up in the barn over the last 100 years, and we're cleaning it out. And it's not a pleasant task. But my commitment to that is something we'll talk about over the course of this next hour. We're making hard decisions. We talked about education, and again, maybe this will come up during the course of the next few minutes. This idea that somehow competition in education is bad for your communities, nonsense. Number one, we're standing right now in a county where 70% of black children cannot read at grade level. 70%. Don't tell me we're serving these kids well. We're failing them. It's an abject failure. And for us to not look for opportunities, whatever those are, no matter how scary they might be to certain people, for us to not look for opportunities, to find the best way possible for every single kid, rural, urban, and otherwise, to rise. You serve every community. Yes, you serve the ag community, but you serve every community. We need every single person to be at the wheel. And this idea that there's something magical about able-bodied working-age men and women getting free health care, and that's the only way for them to have coverage for pre-existing conditions, nonsense. We had a pool that took care of that before we expanded it. And now we have hundreds of thousands of people who could be going to work, who you need to go to work in your communities. I'm committed to making sure that those who can work do work, that we respect God and country, and that we do this in a way that makes Kentucky sparkle. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
All righty. Now we're ready to begin with the questions from our executive committee. Again, you will have 3 minutes to respond to each topic, and the candidate that answers first will have the opportunity for rebuttal if you desire. First topic this morning is the state budget. Mr. Eddie Melton, our first vice president, will address that topic. Eddie?
Okay. Thank you, President Haney, and thank both of you for being here with us today. This is an exciting time for our organization that y'all came out to be with us and let us talk about issues that are important to all of our members all across the state. And as we celebrate 100 years, you know, I think that's outstanding that we get to celebrate 100 years of being an organization that provides for agriculture and on those issues. So going to the state budget, you know, many budget items are important to Kentucky agriculture and to rural Kentucky. So as those need to be critically funded as we move forward. So I have 3 questions that I would like to ask you. First, one of the first priorities of the governor is to put together a state of the biennium budget for the year. So what would be your funding priorities on that first state budget that you have? Secondly, I'd like for you to share your thoughts on funding for the Governor's Office of Ag Policy and the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. And lastly, how do you envision the agriculture development funds being utilized going forward?
Ooh, 3 questions.
Three questions,
minutes.
3
Wait,
minutes.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna stick to the order.
Sure.
So this one, Governor Bevin has
Oh.
first.
I was just excited.
Yeah.
Outstanding. The question on the biennial budget, I mean, we've done a couple of these now. I think you have some sense of my focus on this. We're doing the things that need to be done. It isn't always the fun and easy things. It's not the low-hanging fruit or the things that make everybody happy. But I'll continue to focus on the very things that we have been focusing on. Primary among them is funding our pension system. I'll tell you this, no matter what you think, no matter which bills we've passed or even those which have been proposed, including that which is going to be dealt with in this special session, not one of them begins to address the pension crisis that we're in. They begin to address it. They don't fix it. And don't let anybody tell you that we have fixed or solved the pension problem. And what you see coming from other folks, which is to kick the can down the road, as was done for the last however many years before me, is not the answer. If we don't have our financial house in order, we will not, all the rest of these issues we care about, including funding for the other 2 things you asked about, become moot points. We have to get our financial house in order. So my focus in the next budget will be the same that it has been, being fiscally responsible, being lean and efficient with state government. You've seen my focus. You asked questions about funding for governor's the governor's ag policy and for the Department of Agriculture itself. You've seen where I've been on that in the last 2 budgets. I think, to my knowledge, I'm the only governor that's actually been actively involved with and even chaired and sat in on meetings of that Ag Development Board. This is something that's meaningful to me because of the fact that I know how important it is to these communities. That will continue to be a high priority. It's not just lip service, it's something that I give my time and attention to. Warren Beeler, who has been my point of contact to many of you, is known to many of you. Warren is a person who is well respected in the ag community for good reason. The third question is, going forward, what was the question?
Ag development funds going forward.
Ag
What's your
development
vision
funds
for
going
using
forward.
those?
I mean, there's a couple of things. Whether you look at the apportionment that comes out of the settlement funds, which historically has been 50%, that's been some of the smartest money we've used in state government. It truly has. As Warren is often quick to say, and it's true, it's the only money in Frankfort that is pretty consistently making money. And what we've done with it is be able to redeploy that across the spectrum so that whether it's pioneering new crops, the grain science research, things of this sort, we're being smart with that money. We'll continue to be. I could sit here and gratuitously promise you things, but I guess what I would encourage you to realize is that for the next 2 years and the next 2 years after that, as we have budget sessions, expect to see what you've seen from me thus far. Taking this industry seriously, you're going to see a focus on modernizing tax policy, and we'll get into that, I hope, a bit in this conversation, about ways that will be very meaningful for this community. Why do we have a death tax in this state? I mean, it's silliness. I mean, we're penalizing the very people, not only represented by those in this room, but those that we need for the future generations of Kentucky to succeed. So my focus will continue to be where it has been thus far.
All right, Attorney General Beshear.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to start my answer where it should be, on agriculture. Agriculture is a pillar of Kentucky's economy. And I believe that a budget is more than just simply a number of pages with numbers on them. It is a values document. We have scarce resources and we'll never have enough to do everything we need. So what is in that budget is so critical to what we value. But so is how we talk about it with the Commonwealth. The State of the Budget Address is the one chance a governor can talk to this Commonwealth about the things that he cares about the most. And if you look back, in neither of this governor's budget addresses has he mentioned agriculture once. That is going to change because I'm going to prioritize agriculture right here in Kentucky. We're going to make sure that more than 50% of that master settlement agreement goes to agriculture. And that's important to me because as Attorney General, I've enforced it, I've fought for it, and I've brought those dollars in. We're going to continue to do really good work with it. We're going to make sure we finally fund our transportation budget because our rural roads are about the 6th most dangerous in the country. We lose 2 people on them every day. Think about that. That's 14 a week. That's half of what we lose to the drug epidemic. Those are your kids that you're putting into cars on those roads. Those are my kids too. We're going to do much better. But we're going to do even more than that in our budget, because we are going to focus on agri-tech in a way that is going to build an industry all across Kentucky. We can lead the country and the nation at producing food for a growing world population. It's investing in the science and the seed before it goes into the ground with those engineering and genetics jobs at our community colleges and universities. It's bringing in the companies that create that technology that helps you improve every inch of every acre to improve your yield. It's about the data analytics to make sure that we can predict what's happening just west of us and that you are never wiped out for a full season or part of a full year. What it means having all of that right here is you will have the tools to compete with any mega farm anywhere in this country. We can absolutely lead, and it will be Kentucky under a Beshear Coleman administration that is viewed as leading this country in agriculture. We're going to make sure throughout our budget that we prioritize agriculture, and you are going to see a well-funded department. You are going to see a huge emphasis from the governor's office. I got great people that I listen to. One's over here, and I believe Roger Thomas did a very good job in his role as well. I don't want to follow. I want to lead. And you're going to hear it from the moment I start talking about my budget to when we pass it to when we start bringing those jobs in. We're going to build that I-69 bridge in my first term and open up Western Kentucky because it can be a mecca for job growth. And I'm not going to tell you that you're just going to get the same that you've seen the last 4 years. We can do so much more. We can have a bright future where we all succeed.
Thank you. Governor Bevin, would you like a minute rebuttal?
I'll just touch on 2 things real quickly. The idea that you've heard nothing related to the ag community is only in the ears of those that aren't listening. The things that we've talked about as it relates to tax policy, as it relates to education, as it relates to funding for transportation, as it relates to the ways in which we're paying our people or not and giving people pay increases, the way we're addressing adoption and foster care, all these things are critical to your community. They are. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke and be gratuitous. This idea of the I-69 bridge being done, the only way you can even begin to promise that that could be done is because your father and so many before him for 20 plus years have promised that, and it's never gone anywhere. And in my first weeks as governor, I stood in that spot with the then governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, and we said we're going to accelerate this forward, and that's what we did. And we moved the engineering and environmental studies forward. As it relates to policies that we have done in terms of leading, House Bill 248, some of you were very involved in this and helping us to get this thing through, 246 I should say, in this last session, which provides relief to small farmers in the form of tax credits. So these are the kind of things we've been doing and will continue to do in the years ahead.
Thank you. Our next topic is taxation. Ms. Sharon Furchess, our second vice president, will speak to this topic. Sharon.
Thank you, President Haney. I too want to thank both of you gentlemen for being here with us today. It's an important event for our organization and certainly for all of Kentucky, so we appreciate your attendance here. Tax reform has been addressed by the General Assembly in each of the last 2 legislative sessions. There's a potential for additional reform in the 2020 session. So I have a 2-part question. I won't go as far as 3. How do you think Kentucky's tax code should be further reformed? And what are your thoughts concerning the current agricultural sales and use tax exemption and the state's current property tax laws?
There's no question we need common sense tax reform. We have a 21st century economy, but we haven't updated our tax code to address it. But if we're going to get tax reform, it has to be led by someone that shows you his taxes, that pays them on time, and would never appeal an assessment to a board that he appoints. Why? Because people have to believe the person leading them pays their fair share. It's what everybody out there expects. Any tax reform that we do is going to make sure that we keep those exemptions on sales tax, whether it's on machinery, feed, or other items that are necessary for the agriculture community. And yes, we are going to keep that property tax cap in place. Why? Because you need it to thrive, and I want you to thrive. But part of when we talk about how we use taxes is how we use these tax incentives. And I am done giving tax incentives, our dollars, to out-of-state CEOs that are creating cut-rate jobs in Kentucky, where people in your community can't raise their family on them. I want to use that money smart and invest in something that can create jobs as we move forward, that can make us a leader, like Agritech. Listen, we have an incubator over at Alltech, and they take all types of grant requests. Very few of them come from Kentucky in Agritech. This is where we ought to be going. We shouldn't just have the very best yields, the very best livestock. We should have the very best scientists and data statisticians. We ought to be having universities that lead the country. And UK has made some real good strides in that. How we use those dollars to build an economy where a town in western Kentucky has dozens of new $100,000 jobs a year is I know what we want. Because why? You want your kids to not only be able to stay in Kentucky, but to be able to stay in their community if they want. I'm the dad of a 9 and a 10-year-old. I get that. I want to build the type of commonwealth where my kids would say, why would I go anywhere else? And that's part of tax policy. But I would warn you that anybody who says that we're going to move away from income tax entirely and everything will be consumption tax, oh, but we're going to keep your exemptions in place. You can't trust that. The numbers don't work in what we would have to fund between schools and roads and everything else. I'm always going to be straight with you, and I know we won't always agree on everything. But with me, you have a vision on how we truly build an agricultural economy that can work for everybody, and I really look forward to building that with you.
Yep.
A couple of things. Taxes, what needs to be addressed in the next session, and then sales exemption taxes and things of this sort. We have got to modernize our tax code. Simple as that. I mean, the idea that we can continue to operate with the antiquated tax code that we have is living proof of why we've been stuck where we have been. You look at states like Tennessee immediately to the south of us, bigger versions of it, like states like Texas, where they have moved to more of a consumption-based tax. And this is what we need to do, is move to a consumption-based tax economy. If you truly think it can't be done, why is Tennessee thriving? Why is Texas thriving? It's not going to be done overnight. If we were to literally try to switch it that quickly, you would have double-digit income tax or sales taxes. This isn't something that, frankly, people could afford. It would make us uncompetitive. So we have to walk before we run. We have to move slowly into this process. But without question, we need to do things like getting rid of the death tax. Why do we still have a death tax? Despite the fact that you have $5 million minimums, it penalizes, frankly, a whole lot of people represented by those in this room. It penalizes people who own land, among other things, and want to transfer that to the next generation. Inventory tax. We're a state that has, incredible logistical capabilities. I mean, UPS, DHL, now Amazon building their prime air hub. And Amazon, incidentally, and Nucor and Toyota and others are prime examples of these supposed companies that don't create value added in this state. That's nonsense. If you want to be insular and think you're going to grow everything from inside the state, we're going to continue to be stuck. We need to attract outside capital. We need to use the right incentives to do it. With respect to the tax exemptions that exist, these things have been in place for a long time. You've seen no movement on my part during the course of this administration to make changes to these, and you're not likely to see that going forward. I say not likely because you do understand this policy is driven by the legislature. It's not something I'm going to lead on. It's not something that I'm a proponent of. At the same time, it's important to understand that comprehensive tax reform involves everything being on the table, everything. Every single thing being on the table. What stays on or what comes off is ultimately decided by the final result. But it is critical that we have an honest 21st century conversation. As it relates to, I guess that's most of what you addressed. Let me just simply say this. We have got to be taking better advantage of the policies that we have in this state from a potential. Logistically, we're a state that is blessed with things that couldn't be recreated for any price. And we are doing things to make changes. We've started to get our income tax, both personal and corporate, down. They've been cut by 17%. That's had a real impact in your communities. With respect to the 4% that we authorize to communities, I too am a proponent of having decisions made at the local level. I really do think local decisions are best. Local communities know best how to employ those taxes and use them wisely within a community. Thank you.
I think you heard. With this governor, everything's on the table, including the exemptions that matter to you the most. I'm going to make sure that we protect agriculture. But I'm going to also ask if you like the raised taxes that we saw in the last session. I don't know about you, but I was raised with a bunch of farm dogs. My favorite dog, her name was Rascal. She could have solved any wildlife problems that I know that we're concerned about. Taking those dogs in right now and everybody else's costs a significant amount more because of that tax reform. Folks that work for you and your farm trucks, every time they need repairs, and farm trucks need a lot of repairs, it's costing significantly more every time. I know that. We had to take our family car, and admittedly, I bet I'm the first person running for governor that drives a minivan with his kids. We took that in, and the amount extra on top of the repairs that were needed for that, ooh, that's tough on me. It means it's even tougher on everybody else. We've got to have the type of policies that look out for everybody, that make sure your workers succeed and that you do too.
All righty, thank you. The next topic is rural development. Eddie Melton will address this topic, and Governor Bevin, you will be up first.
Okay, thank you, President HANEY. As a part of rural development, broadband and telecommunication infrastructure improvements are just a must in our rural communities. We've talked about ag technology here. It's so important on our farms now as we go to precision agriculture. There's some days when I get on my farm, I can still start my tractor, but when I want to make it work, I have to call my younger partner to make it work. But to do those things, we've got to have connectivity as we do those things. So I'm just going to ask you two questions this time. How do you plan to get broadband access to our rural communities, and how would you generate rural economic development? And as governor, how would you incentivize the telecom providers to provide this service to our rural communities?
Let me address that. I want to touch on one thing that was said previously. This idea, there's a reason why I vetoed that increase, because that was not comprehensive tax policy. It wasn't. There's a reason that I vetoed it. I was overridden, including with lots of support from your colleagues who like the idea of more taxes on things. This is the kind of thing that truly we need to think about as we move forward in terms of what is comprehensive tax policy. As it relates to broadband, I was left a pig in a poke as it relates to Kentucky Wired. There was a program set in motion by the governor that preceded me that put $273 million worth of bonds out there to provide broadband, good in theory, but absolutely no right-of-ways, no communication with those carriers that you asked about. And we have worked hard because the clock was ticking and the interest was being paid to put that together. We've already completed the first ring in the next couple of months. By the November, we'll have completed the next 2 rings. Broadband is coming to our rural communities because you're right, increasingly, everything from the time the seed is put out to the time the harvest is brought in, even just irrigation, so many things are now controlled by technology. And so you are seeing an investment in this. And we've had a lot of pressure from even within my own party to try to put the kibosh on this, but for 2 reasons I've said that's not acceptable. Number one, you have to make hard decisions when you're in this job. You don't get to just promise things and then hope that they come to fruition. One of those is when you issue debt, you have to stand by it as a state. I inherited that. But what we've done is we've put in place agreements with these carriers, pole agreements. We've gotten the right-of-ways. We're actually not looking to be a competitor to the Windstreams and the AT&Ts and the Appalachian Wirelesses and the whoever's. We're looking to work in partnership with them, to come alongside them to use the resources that the state has to find a way to make sure that we bring connectivity to our communities. These are the things that government should be doing, not trying to be the replacement for the private sector, but to create an environment in which these things work better. And so it is coming. I'll tell you, by 2020, next year, the 101st anniversary of your organization, you're going to see broadband exist like it never has before. That final mile is the rub. What we're focusing on is the trunks and the middle mile. The final mile can only be done through those local carriers. And so empowering them, incentivizing them was the word you asked about. Providing them with incentives, not the least of which is the ability to get an ROI on that. Let's be honest, at the end of the day, you hear people talk a lot about P3 projects. P3 is a public-private partnership, but the middle part, which is the private part, also cares about a 4th P, and that's the profit. And that's the reality of it. If the private sector is going to be incentivized to do something, there has to be something in it for them. There has to be a reason for them to do this. And so we'll continue to incentivize them in ways that allow them to make the kind of money needed to bring this to the communities that are affected. Thank you.
I want to start with your tractor,
Okay?
because I strongly believe that you ought to have the right to repair that tractor and not simply take it to a dealer, and it's time that everybody has that opportunity. Folks, I believe in rural Kentucky, and it's time that we see the development that has been promised but hasn't come to it. You look around eastern and western Kentucky, I'm talking to my cousins in Dawson Springs, and while they're told the economy is great, they're seeing no new jobs in their area. 85% of jobs announced by this governor are in one of 3 cities. And that's why other families feel like they're not just being left out, they are being left behind. Every single day of my administration, we're going to be pitching every single company that comes in about rural sites as well as urban sites. Now, any governor ought to be able to give you 1 or 2 different companies they may have brought in. My goal is to give you so many, it'd be hard to pick out 1 or 2. And to do that, we absolutely need the infrastructure that is broadband, but we also, in so many counties, still need water and sewer that is desperately missing. I'm going to tell you, in my first budget, we're going to put funds towards Martin County and making sure that we finally give them clean drinking water. I believe that that is a basic human right, and before we can bring any new industry into an area, they have to believe that their workers can not only drink the water, but shower in it and brush their teeth too. Building that infrastructure is going to take sacrifice, but that's why you're going to hear me talk about agriculture in our rural communities in my budget address. It's why you're going to see me work every single day, because I want to be a governor for everyone, not just the neighborhood that I live in, but everybody. It's time that we had a voice for Western Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky. And I think you've seen as Attorney General, whether it is the fight against the drug epidemic or my lawsuit against the makers of insulin, because it costs $7 a vial to make, and these companies are selling it for $300 to people who desperately need it to survive, that I fight for my people. Now, I admit, you might not agree with all the fights that I've fought, but you know that no matter who is on the other side, that I'm always willing to fight for Kentucky, that my only allegiance is to you and to our people, and that I'll stand up against anybody that's doing us wrong. You're going to see the types of investments that I know our cities and our counties are clamoring for, and they're going to get a partnership too. County judges, mayors, provide some of the most important services out there. Yet right now, this administration is crushing them with pension debt that we have to address through new revenue. Go talk to those folks. They are not going to be able to provide the services they are, and we're going to have independent school districts that can't stay open. We're having to have a special session because this governor failed to get it done in a regular session. And there are going to be a lot of excuses. We can blame the past. We can talk about shoveling out a barn, but we muck stalls here in Kentucky. But the fact is, governors used to only be able to serve 4 years. I'm going to be one that never makes excuses and gets the job done.
Governor Bevin, you like a rebuttal?
So much there. Only 1 minute. Let me just say a couple of things. First of all, this pension discussion that we're having, as I said, is just the beginning. The idea that we are somehow coming up with onerous amounts of money to be able to slap these on local communities as a way to punish them somehow or to make them suffer is nonsense. The cost of the pensions is the cost of the pension. Even this special session doesn't deal with the true cost of the pension. People talk about this surplus, this monies that came, which indeed did because the economy is working well. 155 extra million going into the pension system. That's less than 25 ten-thousandths of 1% of what we currently owe right now. We haven't even begun to address this. The reason I vetoed that bill was because it was illegal, because it took paychecks away from people that were retired if their former employer stopped making their pension contribution. The fact that you would have supported that speaks volumes. That's illegal. It's illegal. And you should be very mindful of the fact that there is a true cost to running this state. No, we're getting it done, I'll tell you. And again, now we're over our time, but just for the sake of a little back and forth. You decide. You have 50,000, you mentioned companies. It'll be more than 1 or 2. There have been more than 1,200 companies that have expanded or located here in Kentucky in the last 3.5 years. More than 1,200.
Actually, our next topic is infrastructure, and we will continue that with Sharon Furchess leading the topic.
Thank you, President HANEY, again. Infrastructure is essential. I think we all agree to that, to all of our local communities, and it provides critical links to global markets for agriculture, but really for every other industry. What is your plan to provide the resources necessary to maintain Kentucky's current infrastructure, but also to expand it?
Thank you. I talked in the beginning about how dangerous our rural roads are. I believe 6th in the country, and the loss of life is inexcusable. Our roads get rated as a D+. And there have been 2 budget sessions in this last term where the steps could have been taken to address it, and they weren't. I don't think a tiger changed stripes, and I believe that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. So with me, I'm going to tell you that we are going to fund that transportation budget in a way to finally start getting the maintenance we desperately need. Now, it's going to take some short-term fixes, but it's also going to take long-term solutions, because the types of cars that people drive today don't need gas or don't need as much gas. It's going to require us to be forward-thinking and to have the courage to do it. And I know a little something about courage in this job. When I was 3 months into being Attorney General, the governor illegally cut the budgets of all of our universities and community colleges. And everybody around me said, I know it's illegal, but you can't do anything about it because he just won by 9%, and you just won by a landslide of 0.1. But I knew that I had a job to do. Even if it was going to run me out of town, that was okay. I was making a decision at that point that was probably the end, but it's the rule of law, and it was the future of those universities and their ability to spend dollars that were budgeted to them. So yes, I took on that challenge at a time where it was difficult, and I'm going to be willing to make those difficult decisions as governor. We are going to build that I-69 bridge, and if we want to talk about last administrations, another Beshear actually built bridges that no one thought ever could be. We're going to make sure that we take those steps to open up Western Kentucky, to do those mega projects that we desperately need if we are going to continue to grow our economy. And I will tell you, 85% of new jobs announced in my administration won't be in 3 cities. They will be in your communities, because to me, everybody counts. And when I see my family in Dawson, again, they deserve new jobs there. In Eastern Kentucky, per capita income has gone down for a number of counties. They deserve jobs. We've got a lot of miners that are out of work, and a lot of people are trying to help. They deserve to have jobs that are there waiting for them. We have got to do so much better for our people, but it starts with the commitment and the courage to do it.
Everything we want costs money. It's as simple as that. Every single thing. The heart of your question, which wasn't asked specifically, is where does the money come from, and what positions do each of us have as it relates to raising monies going forward? The entire infrastructure project, our roads are paid for out of 2 sources. The Federal Highway Trust Fund, we get about $700 some odd million a year from that. It's fake money. The federal government, it's broke, completely broke, but they print money. We don't get to do that. But it spends like real money. As long as they give it to us, we'll continue to spend it. The only other source we get is the variable excise tax on fuel. It's about 9% on the wholesale price of fuel that you pay at the pump. It's the only other source we have. The question that was buried inside the question is, are we going to have more of that? We're going to need to, in order to be able to pay for the things that we need and want. You mentioned a previous Beshear. The previous Beshear that you mentioned left this state, and me as governor, saddled with $6 billion in deferred maintenance on bridges alone. There were 63 or 4 different overpasses and bridges that had been shut down, just shut down. Sorry, you'll have to go around. This is not acceptable. We cannot keep kicking cans down the road. We have to make hard decisions, hard decisions. It's easy to sit up here and promise things, but they have to be paid for. At the end of the day, everything has to be paid for, whether it's a pension or whether it's a bridge or what have you. We're cleaning up our state parks. The previous 10 years worth of governors, 8 before me and someone named Beshear, as you brought it up, and the 2 years before that, 10 years, we'd put $6 million into the infrastructure of our state parks. 50 state parks, 500 years worth of maintenance, $6 million total. We're cleaning the state capitol right now. It was built in 1910. It has never been cleaned. When I was inaugurated, I looked up and saw all the mold and mildew hanging off of it. And people have gone in and out of there. There's no respect for the things that we have. We've got to be respectful of what we have. We have to pay our way as we go. And whether it's the pensions or whether it's our infrastructure, these things are being done. We have this Bridging Kentucky project that's underway right now. We just let 400 jobs on bridges around our communities, from east to west, north to south, including primarily within these rural communities that have been ignored, sometimes for purely political reasons. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable that things get done for political reasons. This idea that you get to dictate, incidentally, where companies go and locate is not true. You don't. You'll find that out if you ever do someday find yourself in a position of making decisions on economic development. And with respect to you standing up and fighting for the people of Kentucky, it was you and your law firm that defended Purdue Pharma and settled for $24 million with the previous Attorney General, a lawsuit that Oklahoma just got $270 million from the same company. And you swept it out the door for $24 million because your law firm was on the hook as the defender of Purdue Pharma. And $4 million of that $24 million went to Jack Conway's new law firm where he's suddenly a partner. And incidentally, they didn't even have a contract with the state, but you afterwards gave them a backdated contract to try to make it look like it was legit and legal. The bottom line is this: you cannot do illegal things and then patronize people, blow smoke. You got to make hard decisions, and everything that does have to be paid for.
Would you like to rebuttal?
Sure.
Figured I'd give you something to talk about.
Folks, I'm not running for governor to spin conspiracy theories. I'm running for governor to help our people. This is my state. I love it with every ounce in my body. And on opioids, I've been the most aggressive attorney general in this country at going after manufacturers and distributors. In fact, when I sued Johnson & Johnson, which the Oklahoma attorney general just got through with trial, this governor said, I don't support that lawsuit. I don't support anything he does. And that got me thinking, what about tripling the number of child predators we've removed from our communities? I think we should support that. What about arresting a record number of human traffickers and saving a record number of victims? I think we ought to support that. What about working to end Kentucky's rape kit backlog with 10 indictments that have now come out of it? I think we ought to support that. What about working to cut $2 billion of rate increases that utilities tried to charge you extra on your bills for electricity and water? I think we ought to support that. You might not have agreed with all my fights, but I bet you agree that I fight hard. I'm ready to fight for you and all Kentuckians.
All righty, gentlemen, thank you so much for participating in these questions today. Based on the coin tossed earlier, Governor Bevin, you will go first in your 5-minute closing remarks.
You hear a lot of talk. I'll just speak to the last thing that was just said. You talk about fighting these opioid manufacturers. How many dollars has Kentucky seen from any of that?
We will.
How many?
We'll
Other states who started after us have gotten hundreds and hundreds of millions. The reality is you blow a lot of smoke. You make a lot of promises. You file a lot of lawsuits. You fight this administration and you fight this state for political reasons. At the end of the day, you all have a decision to make. You, the people you represent, your customers, your communities. One of the two of us is going to be the next governor of Kentucky. One of the two of us. You don't get to pick part of me, part of him. You don't get to pick part of the best elements of yourselves that you'd like. You get one of the two of us. It's that simple. It's a binary choice. In the last 3.5 years, we've seen more than $20 billion in private capital invested in this state. Those are seeds in the ground. Those are things germinating. That is investment the likes of which we've never seen in any 2-year term in any preceding administration. We've seen more than 53,000 new jobs created in this state. We've seen record levels of investment like this that are starting to happen. Why? Because people believe that we're serious about paying our bills, about shrinking the size of government, about making hard decisions as it relates to modernizing taxes and as it relates to pensions. It is by putting everything on the table, assuming nothing, patronizing nobody. These are fiscal things primarily that we've talked about. There's other fundamental things as well. As it relates to things like sanctuary cities, we're very much on the opposite side of the equation. I don't believe that ours is a state that should tell certain members of law enforcement that they don't have to cooperate with the federal government, that we can allow people who are breaking the law to continue to break the law and we're not going to prosecute them. You've been remarkably silent on this. On the life issue, I strongly am supportive of life at every stage from beginning to end, strongly pro-life. I'm running against an individual who very proudly not only supported Hillary Clinton on multiple occasions and Barack Obama before that, but is very proud of the fact that he's supported by Planned Parenthood and NARAL. It doesn't seemingly matter as it relates to the things we've talked about here, but it matters tremendously to people in this state. Pro-abortion, pro-life. I'm a supporter of the Constitution and of limited government, of individual opportunity. I grew up well below the poverty level. I know what it's like to have no health care coverage. I don't have sympathy for such people. I have empathy for such people. It's the world I come from. But I know that the greatness of America is this, that a kid like me can be standing on this stage as the governor of this state, talking to you about the opportunity, asking you for the opportunity for 4 more years to continue to move forward in the way that we have been. That is the greatness of America, not people being promised things, being given things that they didn't earn. As my father once said to me when I asked him why we didn't take the government cheese, he said, don't take something that you didn't earn. Don't ever take something that you didn't earn. We have too much of that in America, too much of that, sadly, in our own state at times. There are people who want to promise the moon, but it all has to be paid for. These are decisions you're going to have to make as you move forward. We're on a different trajectory now. Final thing I'll say is this. Do you want a governor of your state that actively works against the president of your United States? It doesn't matter what your party, it doesn't matter what you think of the president or not. Do you want a governor of Kentucky actively working against, publicly bragging about the fact that he'll fight the policies of the then standing president? You don't have to agree with every person on everything. But the bottom line is this. We have Kentucky now in a position that we never have. On the national scene, locally, economically, it takes 15 to 20 years to change the culture of a state. Take a look at Indiana. Take a look at the trajectory Tennessee is now on. Look at Texas. I was in the military in Texas 25 years ago when they elected Ann Richards, followed by George Bush, followed by Rick Perry, followed by Greg Abbott. Look at that trajectory, one of the top 10 economies in the world. It's not easy. I've always said if you want to eat something quickly, you plant radishes, but who wants a plate full of radishes? The reality is for the things that we want, it takes time to germinate. It takes time for things to be done in a way that are meaningful for our children and our grandchildren, and that's what this is about. We are shoveling out the barn. It isn't pleasant, it isn't easy, but it needs to be done. My commitment to you is to continue to do so and to honor the men and women as I have by giving raises to law enforcement officers, social workers, prosecutors, transportation workers for the first time in many instances in 10 or 12 years. I'll continue to support those who support us. I'll continue to fight for you like I fought for this nation when I wore her uniform, and I'll defend this state the way I would defend my own family. I'd be grateful for your vote again this November. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you all so much for having me here today, and I look forward to an administration where you and everybody else has a seat at the table. And something happened today that we probably never thought was possible. Matt, Bevin, and I agree on something. We agree on the fact that, yes, you can only choose one of the two of us. And what I've heard very often from the governor is you should choose the person that you would want to leave in charge of your company. Would it be a person that would attack, bully, and demean your employees because teachers are the most important employees here in Kentucky? Would it be someone that would hire their buddies to exorbitant salaries with your company dollars like we've seen with Charles Grendel and our state dollars? Would it be somebody that couldn't get along with the COO, which is the lieutenant governor here in Kentucky? Would it be somebody that wouldn't even show you the financials of how your company is doing, like hiding a pension analysis that we all deserve? Would it be somebody that wouldn't show you what he's making from your company, hiding tax returns? Folks, yes, I could take your company in a direction because I keep the promises I make. Everything I told you I would do as Attorney General, we have worked to get done, and we have broken and shattered every single way that we judge our office. From the number of child predators to taking Kentucky to be a leader in human trafficking. We just saved 12 kids in Bowling Green who were being carted around to sell candy, that had to sleep in one hotel room, that weren't being given food. Those are children of God. And without the work we've done these past 4 years, we would have not made that rescue. I've worked every single day on trying to make your community safer because I know, but for the grace of God, my kids could be in anyone else's position. And I don't just want to work for the people that work for us. I want to work for everybody. because we all count in this state. And my faith compels me that the least, the lost, the lonely, and the left behind deserve our help. I fought for them as Attorney General. I'm going to fight for them as Governor because we are going to have a state that lifts everyone up. And I look forward to having unity of purpose, where we all know where this state is going and we all feel like we are a part of it. That we all know no matter what we do, the small things we can do to help us achieve what we've always dreamed in this state. A state where no one is ever locked out of the Capitol, where disagreements are okay. That's how government is supposed to work, and no one in this state is an enemy. I look forward to returning the type of decency to Frankfort and the governor's office that I was raised with. Every day I look at what's going on in Frankfort and I think we were raised better than this. When we make a change, we're going to start acting better than this too. But at the end of the day, this should all come down to vision. Who's serving in the next 4 years is going to create that foundation that your community is going to benefit from or suffer. You've had 4 years to see what hasn't happened in our rural communities, but you've never heard a governor, a candidate, embrace agri-tech in the way I want to. It's going to be one of our top priorities. We're going to be creating those amazing jobs in the future in an area that is absolutely critical to you, giving you the chance to have that technology first, those seeds first, the data analytics that no one else will have so that you can succeed more than anywhere else in this country. I came here today to talk agriculture, and I think I stayed on topic. But this next choice is so important. What do you want your governor to sound like? When a governor comes to your community, is he going to be a person that you can take your kids to see because agree or disagree with him? You're not worried what's going to come out of his mouth, and you know he's going to say decent things that we can all ultimately agree on. This is the most important election of my lifetime because of how many are being left out. And it's bigger than me. I'm running for every single Kentuckian out there, every single teacher who's been attacked, those whose pensions were illegally cut, those living in communities that deserve better jobs, those suffering from the drug epidemic, that use expanded Medicaid to get their services. And these changes, these copays, are going to lock them out for up to 6 months. We got to treat our neighbor as thyself. I'm going to do that every single day and create not only a prosperous Kentucky, but one that works for all of us. Again, thank you so much for having me. And I want to thank Billy Ray Smith, an amazing agriculture commissioner, for being here today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Let's thank our candidates once again for being here so much. I do. I've just given the candidates a questionnaire to fill out, have back by September the 4th, and we're going to print the results of that in our October KFB News. So it will be going out to all of our membership, and it will be utilized very good. We do appreciate the media being here with us today. You play an extremely important part to this forum, and we appreciate that. And I'm going to ask you if you would start the transition over to my left over here. We're going to have a press conference right there, and we will be starting. Jeff will be running this part. Jeff Harper will be parting this part of the show. Again, thank you so much for being here. Let's give them another round of applause as they start.
Check. Okay.
All right. Thank you all very much for being here, and we will take your questions.
You mentioned you were going to bring ag tech. You would give farmers the first opportunity for that next technology. Bayer, Corteva, lots of other companies are originating that. How do you bring that technology into your administration?
Well, so much of what is driven by that technology right now are startups and companies that are looking for a location. Just look at the different funds that Altex and others have. Our goal is going to be to use our tax incentives and every other means in government, including direct pitches by our next governor, to locate those companies here and to also make sure our universities have the programs that they need along with the community college. Agritech is everything from the science and the seed before it goes into the ground, the genetics, the chemistry, where it attracts the good bugs and repels the bad bugs and can withstand some of this flooding that we've recently seen. It's a technology that goes on the tractor that as it's going and driving that perfectly straight line, which increases the yield, also analyzes every single inch of soil as it goes. And it's the data analytics because this historic flooding we have seen, we have to know when it's coming to get ahead of it. We live in a time of changing weather patterns, and every farmer will tell you that. We can be the center that grows the food for a growing world population, and we can have all of those jobs right here.
Attorney General, do you think that the president's go-back tweets were racist aimed at those four Democrat congresswomen? Were they racist tweets?
I think that they were wrong and ugly, and he should have never tweeted them.
I asked, though, if they were racist tweets, though.
Well,
The fact that it says go back to your origins, country of origin, when
yeah.
3 of them are born in the United States.
Well, I don't think anybody should ever be told to go back to another country. Those are U.S. citizens. They ought to be treated with respect. It is ugly. It is wrong.
Is it racist, though? Is it racist, though?
Lawrence?
General Beshear, the governor has drawn a clear line in a couple of areas. One, social issues like abortion and sanctuary cities, and also, secondly, relationship with President Trump. Would you address both of those, please?
Well, it was real interesting to see today. You know, we're talking about agriculture, and I've been to a few rodeos, but people don't have to stay on the bull as long as this governor can't stay on topic. I mean, it's talking about the future of agriculture and where we're going, where our jobs are going to come from in the future, the investments that we can make. But this governor has shown no vision in that area. He has nothing to tell people moving forward how we can create jobs in eastern and western Kentucky. So what does he do? He tries to distract people with other issues. And listen, if he's got a relationship with this president, why hasn't he used it to address tariffs that are harming our soybean farmers? Tariffs that are harming our bourbon makers. If you're a good friend with the president, it ought to be used in a way that helps Kentucky. For me, I have no allegiance to anyone other than the people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So when a president, any president, is doing something good for Kentucky, I'm going to support it. This president has funded our cold case unit that goes after the rape kit backlog. But when a president, any president, does something that harms Kentucky, I'm going to oppose him, like this president has some drastic policies that would rip health care away from over 500,000 Kentuckians. We deserve a leader that fights for Kentuckians and not a follower looking to get a job in another city from another person.
But address those specific issues he's talking about, the abortion issue and the sanctuary city issue.
Address it how? We have no sanctuary cities.
But so do you support that bill that he touted last week?
I haven't read the bill, but you've got to think that every time we are in session, we have that limited amount of time to do what's best for our people. And with 0 sanctuary cities, we're going to spend our time on a bill about sanctuary cities. Let's make sure we're addressing problems we actually have.
Listening to your criticism of President Trump, the question is raised then, how can you work with President Trump at all if you oppose him publicly?
Well, I'm already working with him and his Department of Justice on our rape kit backlog. We work with him on an elder abuse task force right now, one of 20 in the country. We have a number of different programs, and the president, I didn't make the last time that we were up there, but he was going to ask about human trafficking and the things that we're doing together with the federal administration. We already work with the president on that. But the governor of Kentucky ought to fight for Kentuckians and not have some blind allegiance to anybody. I both supported and opposed the last president. As governor, I'll support and oppose any president depending on how their policies help or harm Kentucky.
Purdue Farmer came up again today. Do you regret any of your actions connected to Purdue Farmer?
I didn't take any actions related to Purdue Pharma. I wasn't a part of any legal team, and I wasn't a part of the Attorney General's office when anything happened. That is a conspiracy pushed by someone who's willing to say anything to get reelected.
How did you oppose Barack Obama?
There were some EPA regulations that our state filed suit over.
How do you pay for all the infrastructure for rural Kentucky when you have trouble paying for infrastructure for the cities?
Well, what we've got to do in our transportation budget is both short-term fixes. When the floor on the gas tax was allowed to fall so far, we have lost hundreds of millions of dollars that we desperately need. But addressing that won't solve the long-term problem, because there are more and more electric cars out there, which is a good thing. But those are still cars that are using the roadway, and we've got to make sure that we can fund those changes we desperately need. Part of it is we are going to put more of the budget into rural roads. At the end of the day, a budget is a values document, and when we have 2 people killed on rural roads every single day, I'm going to be the governor that makes sure we address that and we don't lose any more of our family members.
But should there be an increase in the gas tax?
We have to increase that floor, yes.
How would you move many of your policy ideas forward in a Republican-controlled legislature?
Well, we've seen right now a governor that can't work with his own Republican-controlled legislature. And part of it is I'm going to start out by treating them with respect, something we haven't seen. I'm going to make sure that we don't continue this back and forth that we see, that we immediately change the tone, like Roy Cooper has tried to do, for instance, in North Carolina. Then I'm going to build relationships. See, I'm going to show up to work every day. And I'm going to make sure that we get to know every single individual in that legislature, because they come from areas that need help that governors can provide. Their kids are interested in different things that my kids may be interested in too. And they have different views on different issues, and every vote shouldn't break down Democrat versus Republican. We're Kentuckians, and we ought to start acting like it.
We have time for 2 more questions. 2 more questions.
Whenever we go to these types of events, we hear stories that are told towards the audience. Both of you talked about country charm types of stories. What kind of a dog was Rascal? Did he really exist?
So first, country charm and muck and stalls. I find that interesting, Chris. So Rascal was the first dog that was ever mine. I was 17 years old. She was part chow, part foxhound, and part German shepherd. She absolutely loved people but hated any other animal. That dog lasted until she was about 11 on a farm. She loved life. I loved her. We had her full sister, Kelsey, who lasted a little bit longer. And of all the strange things, we also had a Westie that ran away from a different farm. I think loved our 2 dogs enough, and that one stayed with us for about another 14 years, living outside too.
Attorney General, last question. I know you've said before that you don't ever disagree with your father and that you took on...
I've never said that.
...illegal actions. When your father didn't have any minorities on the University of Louisville Board of Trustees, would you have made some sort of action as Attorney General in that matter?
Oh, we would have enforced the laws. The laws require minority representation, and I strongly believe in that. I hope to create a U of L board that has more than the minimum that is in law, that recognizes that our university board ought to look like the community that it's in. And I've never said I won't disagree with my father. I say we're a tight family, and I'm not going to do that publicly. That's not what we do.
All right, thank you. We have to go.
We're only going into a special session because this governor and this legislature failed to get the job done. I was asked about a Republican legislature. Yes, they control the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, and they still couldn't get done what they needed to get done. The disagreements that they should have worked out ahead of time are now going to cost us $66,000 a day. And what they're doing to these rape crisis centers and child advocacy centers that do incredible work. We work with them every day as Attorney General, seeking justice for kids and people who have been harmed. What they're doing is giving them an impossible choice. Take this crushing debt where you won't be able to stay open, or pay off a crushing debt that you can't afford over the next number of years. It is not a realistic solution. But I tell you what, my hope is some way they end up freezing those increases. And then in November, we're going to get a new governor, and we're going to immediately set about creating new revenue to address this pension system and take that burden off those institutions.
We're out of time.
Thank you all very much.
Hey, guys, what questions do you have?
Governor, you talked about this being a binary choice. Could you talk about that and the importance in your mind of social issues as opposed to other issues in this case?
All the issues matter. I'll tell you, sadly, the social issues become somewhat moot if we don't have our financial house in order. That's just the hard reality of it. But it's a very clear choice. You have a candidate who's never created a job in the private sector in his entire life in the form of Andy Beshear versus somebody who's created hundreds and hundreds of jobs, paid hundreds of millions of dollars in payroll and taxes, who've started company, who's committed his own private capital to getting things going. So you have people from a business perspective, somebody who's been in the business sector and somebody who never has. Somebody who's riding his father's coattails politically, for who thinks he's part of a family fiefdom. Somebody like myself for whom this is the first political job that I've ever had. Somebody in the case of Andy Beshear who's very strongly pro-abortion, proud of the fact that NARAL, the most activist pro-abortion people in the country, came here, went door to door, endorsed him, gave him money, versus somebody like myself who's very unapologetically pro-life. Not everybody agrees with me, but the idea that we think it's appropriate for any reason to kill children is just surprising to me. It just is. And I don't need or want this job badly enough to misrepresent what I believe about anything in order to get it or to keep it. I just don't. I'm here to make hard decisions, adult decisions, not to give platitudes or blow smoke. These are the kind of things that people have to think about when they go in. And indeed, I would ask people to think about who would they rather have running their business if they had to be on sabbatical for a year? Who would they have looking out for their community or their families if they needed one of the two of us to make the decisions needed on their family's behalf, on their employees' behalf, on their business's behalf? They only get to choose one. You never get a perfect candidate. You never get somebody who's everything that somebody would want. But these are important times in Kentucky. We've got big, big decisions to make. And we are on a trajectory that is changing where we've been. There's a reason we're stuck where we are. 75 years ago, Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee all had the same population. Why is it that they, as states that are the same size as us and that have fewer logistical and meteorological and seasonal advantages than we do? Why is it that they now have 6 to 7 million people each and we're still at 4.5 million? Because of bad policy for 100 years. I talked about cleaning out the barn. That's exactly what we're doing. We're cleaning out 100 years worth of bad, backward, dormant, insular thinking policies, where people who got to office were more worried about handing out trophies and greasing their own wheels. I'm running against a guy who he and his father employed a guy now in federal prison for embezzlement and bribery. He promised to give that money back that he received, all that money that was then slushed into his account. He has never given that back. You all haven't held him to account on that. You can go backwards. That's what this state is about. This choice is about. We know where we've been as a state. We know where we are now. We know the trajectory we're on. And not everybody agrees with the trajectory we're on. Those people who want the free lunch, they don't like it so much. I can't believe he would stand here quite seriously and say that it's inappropriate to ask able-bodied men and women who have no children to do something in exchange for free health care when it's being provided to them free by people, some of whom go to work every day and don't even have the same quality of health care themselves. We've got big decisions to make here. This isn't a game. I'm not here to blow smoke. I'm not trying to win, a club. I'm asked by you all the time about, popularity or favorability. This isn't about that. Anybody who wants to be popular shouldn't even be in this business to begin with. But if you plan to do this job and do it well and do what needs to be done, you're going to have to make hard decisions. This is a very clear binary choice. I'm sorry?
What's your relationship with your teachers now, and of the roadblock that you had before? How do you mend that in the next administration in the classroom?
I think it's important to understand I'm the only governor in the history of Kentucky to ever fund the pension plan for teachers. Ever. Like ever. In the history of Kentucky. The previous governor some years didn't even put in 50% of the bare minimum required to keep the fund from falling farther behind. I'm also the only governor in the history of Kentucky to never sweep the lottery funds, ever. Never swept them, put 100% of them into education. We're also putting more as a result of our last budget into K through 12 education in the SEEK formula than we ever have, per pupil and in absolute numbers. So these things are the things that I'll tell you what, most teachers understand. Are there some that are angry for reasons that they don't even fully understand? Seemingly so. But understand this, there's about 125,000 active or retired teachers, about 125,000 or so in Kentucky. I'd say on any given day, 200-300 of them seem to be on social media. And let's say 500, let's say it is, although it's not that many. Let's say those 500 each speak for 20 other people who think just like them but don't use social media. That would be 10,000 people. It's 10,000 out of 125,000. I think the other 115,000 clearly, and trust me, I ran on these issues about addressing this. I wouldn't be governor if it weren't for the fact that I had support from them and so many others. 115,000 plus other people care about the fact that they're going to have something to retire on. You could sit here and blow smoke, but the reality is we have to fund things. We have to pay for things. There are within my immediate family 6, my grandmother, father, siblings, 6 public education degrees. This idea that I don't understand or appreciate or know anybody associated with public education is nonsense. My children have been in public education, private education, and homeschooled. I do what is best for each of my children. That's what every parent should do. And for those for whom the only option is public education, we better make sure that every single kid has the best education possible. That's what any good teacher cares about. That's the primary reason why people go into education, is to take care of our young people, to educate them. And we want every single kid to have a shot at the American dream here in Kentucky. And that includes the 70% of black kids in this community who cannot read at grade level. That is immoral. It's repugnant to me. And anyone who would defend that as being something that we should continue to replicate, that somehow we're doing a good job, that that's good enough, nonsense. We need to start to think about things too, even though it didn't come up here. Things like busing. Are we helping these kids? If we are, great. If we're not, let's rethink it. That's a 1970s policy. We have kids spending hours a day on a school bus. They don't belong to any community. They come from homes where transportation is an issue, so there isn't even any ability to have any extracurricular participation for them or for their parents. They become these little educational nomads riding around this city on buses, belonging to nowhere, having no community involvement in their upbringing and lives in the way that they would if they had community-based schools. Let's start to be smart about what we do with education. I think teachers understand this. I think they get this. I think you'll see that evident in the voting this fall. Other questions? You'll have to talk to the president about his tweets.
So you won't say whether or not you thought that was racist?
Do I think that the president is racist? Are you asking me if I think the president is racist?
I'm asking you if you think those tweets
Would a person who is not racist send racist tweets?
It's possible, yeah.
So what is the question you're asking me?
Were those tweets racist?
I will let the president speak for his own tweets. I will speak for any tweet that I put out. Do I think the president is racist? Absolutely not. I know him personally. He knows me and my family personally. Anybody like yourself who is trying to imply that is literally just trying to be divisive. Shame on you.
If someone told your children because they disagree with American policy to go back to Africa, would that be racist?
Again, I'm not going to get into hypotheses with you about something that somebody might say. Do any of you have any questions about things germane to Kentucky?
Agritech. So Andy Beshear talked a lot about agritech.
Yeah. So did Adam Edlin, incidentally.
Do you agree with his...
A lot of potential for things in the 21st century. No question. But where are the specifics? What specifically? How is he going to get these people to come here, especially when where is this science going to come from? Look at the hemp industry, for example. Where is all the capital that's being invested in this state, in the hemp industry, coming from? Is it coming from inside the state, or is it coming from people outside coming here and investing capital and employing people? Primarily the latter. And yet you sit here and regale, and disparage people like this and say that we're not going to have these outside CEOs coming in here and taking advantage of our people. Nonsense. They're the ones coming and creating opportunity. This is a fertile place. There is a reason why we have 4.5 million people in states around us have 6 to 7, and we're all the same in many other respects. We've got to have policies that make it clear that we want people to be here. And that includes on all fronts. I want us to engineer and manufacture the best products in the world, and that includes agri-products. And of course that's going to involve technology. Of course that's going to involve advanced science. It's going to involve things that are being done now by companies like Alltech and others, but it's also going to involve things we haven't even begun to conceive of yet.
Outside of revamping tax code, where do you get revenue? You talked about difficult questions and difficult decisions. How far can you cut and cut and cut?
You can. There's no way to do this by cutting.
Can you support raising taxes on gas or other taxes raised in this next general session?
The road fund is the variable excise tax on gas we talked about. Clearly, that's the only source of monies that we have control over. If we need and want more, we're going to have to pay for the things we need and want. You asked about alternative sources. I mean, the guy that just preceded me at this podium literally was telling you all that we need to go to expanded gaming. We've also had conversation, I think they're sending us a warning here. I think we've had conversations too about legalizing marijuana. The idea that legalizing marijuana, which might generate $100 million a year in revenue, or casino gaming, which might generate a couple $100 million a year, is going to solve the pension crisis is absurd. Absurd. Every single one of us would need to gamble for 300 years just to pay what we currently owe in unfunded liability. We'd have to smoke pot for 600 years. That's what 100 million times 600 years is 60 billion, which is what we're currently short. So as it relates to alternative sources of funding for things, the only way, to the first part of your question, is to have more people in Kentucky paying taxes. We need to have more people paying less tax each. The only way you get more people is to have them pay less tax each. There's a reason why people are going to states like Texas, not because they like being there this time of year. No one likes to be in Texas in July and August. Nobody. Let's be honest about it. But why are they going there? They're going there for tax policy. And they're doing this because it is an environment in which capital is welcome.
You talk, and I've heard you mention how many hundreds of years people would have to smoke pot and gamble in your math. Have you done the math on how many people would have to move to Kentucky to put us on the positive side of the ledger?
Think about this. If you had 2 million more people here, which would put us on average with the states immediately north and south of us that are both 40,000 square miles like we are, that have some of the very same socioeconomic and demographic issues, and yet we're better logistically and seasonally. If we had 2 million more people, which would put us in line with them, if just 30% of them paid taxes, if you had 600,000 more taxpayers, or what if it was 35 or 40%? 6, 7, 800,000 more taxpayers. That's how you fix these problems. That is the only way, Chris. There is no way you're going to bring in any other sort of things, gambling or pot or any of these things. Nor, to your point, can you cut your way to this. It's impossible. Impossible. The only way we pay what we need to pay for the obligations we've already incurred and to those that are yet to come is to have more people living here. And we have more arable land and we have more seasonal advantages than either of those states to our north and south. And this is a state where these things can and will happen, but it starts with good policy. We need to build it. They will come.
Governor, neither of the candidates on the program today mentioned anything about renewable fuel or the Kentucky Proud program of more Kentucky food for Kentuckians. Is there a place for renewable fuel to grow, which is opportunity for Kentucky farmers?
There's opportunity for all the above. I mean, it was driven in large measure by the questions that were asked. But these are programs that have been expanding. They're a little bit, renewable fuel and food for people's families are two different things. I mean, one is taking food and turning it into fuel. The other is taking food and turning it into fuel in people, one in vehicles and one in people. So, but yes, there is. And I think the key is, how can we be smart about it? Not just do what we've done in the past, but let's continue to find ways to refine this. I was recently down in Hopkinsville meeting with a bunch of farmers for whom this is a very important and topical question. We were meeting actually at one of the largest ethanol plants in this entire region of the country. And so it is meaningful, it's topical. It's tough when corn prices are where they are right now.
That's all we have time for today.
What kind of animals did you sleep in the stalls with? I got to ask that question. You mentioned it. I asked Andy Beshear about his dog.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.